Welcome back to the Verbonden podcast. I am Elise Luyckx and this is part 2 of my deep dive with strategic architect Edzo Botjes. In the last episode, we talked about anti-fragility and the limits of control. But technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is used by people. Today, Edzo explains why he views an enterprise as a social construct. We discuss the famous Unix Philosophy, the holy grail of architecture communication, and why your job as an architect is more about coaching than drawing blueprints. If you want to close the gap between your strategy and the reality of the work floor, this episode is for you. Do you want to sharpen your skills as an enterprise architect? Welcome to Verbonden, the podcast where we combine insights from experienced professionals with real-world examples from the world of architecture. My name is Elise Luyckx and I am your guide through the layers of enterprise architecture, making it less mythical and more concrete. So, allow me to coin the term socio-technical systems.
Yeah.
Which actually refers, you were touching on the concept, I think. It refers to the idea that you cannot change the technology without understanding the people and the culture that are using the technology. So they are, in a way, the same, two sides of the same coin. Yeah, this is a more also something that I'm interested in as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of architects struggle with the rise of the agile and DevOps, feeling like they've lost authority to say yes, no, this way it's gonna look at it, to design it instead of having the design emerge. How do you see the role of the architect evolving? Is it more about coaching than commanding?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you said in the Netherlands. So what I find interesting about DevOps and Agile is that it's the diversity within society on this topic, which company is where in their adoption of it is enormous. So in 2008, I was at a company that was already working Agile. And we worked Agile at their company. At a different bank at 2014 or something, we moved from DevOps to squads. And their DevOps was already running for a lot of time. And we are now 2026, many years later, and still there are companies that are starting Agile or not. In the Netherlands, we've seen a large intake of architects a few years after the start of Agile working. Because we found out that all the different autonomous teams were focused inward. And with the Scrum Masters, we focus on how can we work on our highest performance. But the overarching narrative between the teams, there was nobody there to have that. And for that demanded a capability like architecture to have a conversation over. And nowadays you see that there are multiple roles within architecture defined in all the different types of governance systems around Agile teams, be it Scrum, be it another way of working Agile. So I see that the demand for architects in the Netherlands is still rising. For solution architects in the last few years, a lot of enterprise architects, they have more like what's going on with all the different demands from different contexts, from suppliers, from consumers, legislation, and how are we going to process all those desires in our organization. And how are we going to organize to facilitate this continuous change? So in the Netherlands, demand for architects is really high. I have no clue how it's in different countries because I'm not active in different countries. But my assumption is if they go through an agile transformation, and the same demand will be there, because the architect itself as a role, as a capability, is about how to support change.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, then the role's changing from away from the blueprint architects purely on IT. So more to the coaching and more looking about value streams and about adaptability. Because the design of the IT system is that mandate is within the team. So you should not be proclaiming that, because then you are taking away the mandate from the autonomous teams.
Yeah. I've been during these podcast conversations as well, and conversations offline, I've become to look at architecture as not something that you are, but something that you practice. It's like, to me, it's like practicing medicine. You know, it's like practicing something.
Yep.
And building the capability. Like it's if you build a capability in an organization, it's always never one person who is that capability.
Yeah. And even beyond that, it's not even so. When we teach enterprise architecture, we try to look at it from a role, the enterprise architect, from a product, the enterprise architecture, and from the capability. And the capability itself is not limited to the people that call themselves architect. There are many different roles in organization that are working on how to deal with the change in the organization, how to facilitate that and how to guide that. And that's all needed for the capability of enterprise architecture. So I'm not certain if enterprise architecture itself is the right word for it even more, because you're designing the organization, you're facilitating the change, and a lot of people are working with that don't call themselves enterprise architects. So,
yeah. I work as a consultant, and when I'm working with a client, I tend to have conversation with people where I say that I know you're a product owner, or I know you're a manager, or I know you're a CIO, but I feel like you are an architect. You're almost, you are really architecting in your job. And very often people, they are a bit frightened of the word, but almost not all the time insulted. But it does surprise them when I say to them, you are an architect in this company. I started out this season as well in September with the question, what is enterprise architecture and the difference with enterprise design? You said that enterprise architecture, it's almost not the right term. And so my question for you is, enterprise design, would that be the right term, or would you look into a different direction?
I don't know, because I'm not that good in words. and everybody has different understanding of what a word means. Like from a design, basically that's also a passive word, and the change is continuous, and people are continuously learning and changing and doing stuff. And the architecture is how things are intertwined to give insight into that and guide it, and what are the principles to stay coherent with each other while changing continuously. So I think it depends on what you want to do. In my domain, there's even a group that's called enterprise engineers. So they make a distinction between the more creative design parts and say, okay, design is one domain, and engineering, where it's more like if A, B, C, then that's a different domain. So I find it really hard to find out, and I'm not that really interested in the right word, because because that's a battle. There's no solution for it. Just like you can never be secure, it's also you will never find the right word, because for resilience there are like a gazillion definitions, and on architecture and enterprise architecture there are a gazillion ways of doing it, and everybody has their own book about how to do enterprise architecture, and there are so many definitions and books and frameworks. It's mind-boggling. So yeah, I don't know.
I think I think your response it's very fair, because a lot of the time my question is actually about semantics. So I do feel with your reaction now, I feel like maybe it's the wrong question to ask.
Well,
yeah, we should.
Your question is never wrong. so I think just with questions and so my question would be, why are you asking the question? What do you want to find out?
Yeah, I am experimenting with. Am I an enterprise architect? Am I? Because there's this different, many layers. Like you said, some people are calling themselves engineering, and I have been feeling, coming from the economics background, that some people are moving towards the engineering level. And I do see a lot of people that are more creative, who are looking into other directions, because they feel enterprise architecture is almost like a scientific engineering function, where you need to increase the certainty of the certainty of the outcomes of the organization. But then again, it becomes very complex. I've been looking at organizations as systems, or like if you look at a person, one person, which is I will say it's one dot in the organization. If I speak with friends, family, look at myself, people have flaws, though. So if you ask them to do the same thing over and over again, different. It's like an AI engine. It's like an AI. a different outcome will be there. And this way that people are different from each other, unique. They have flaws. If you put a lot of people together, you can expect a very, very flawed system. And then again, with all the beautiful, unique qualities, you can also look at it as a very, very beautiful system. And for me, an enterprise is actually a sum of those people with their unique capabilities and their flaws.
Yeah.
However, if you take out a person, an organization should be able to continue existing.
Yeah, the question is, does it?
Does it?
So the enterprise will stay the same. And I've been at many clients, and before me they exist, and after me they exist. So yeah, and that's for even for people that worked there for 60 years or 40 years. It's but I think the question is more, what does it mean for you to call yourself enterprise architect or not? And what does it matter? And because the shift you made from what does it mean for you to other people, that's an interesting shift, because you cannot influence what other people are thinking or doing, and cannot oversee it, because We are limited in what we see. But you can influence what you yourself are doing and feeling. And I think choosing the words that fit you best and discover why they fit you best, I think that's the most beautiful question there is and the most important question. Because the other people also are only screaming against themselves and based on what they don't know and know. Yeah. In the end,
It's a
nobody knows.
mirror almost. If
Yeah.
you speak to other people, it's a mirror. If they react, you see how they you might see how they interpret whatever you say or whatever you're communicating and how they can see it differently.
Yeah. And that's that's why in enterprise architecture why everybody has their own framework, and if you have a framework, everybody applies in different ways. Because of this, everybody is shouting against themselves, and that's valid. That's not a bad thing. But yeah. And a friend of mine is doing his PhD in enterprise architecture on the value of a model. So he wanted to find out if one. Yeah, so I'm creating a diagram in my enterprise architecture document. He is creating a diagram in his enterprise architecture document. We both are defining principles, but which design is better? Which document is better? Has more value or more quality or whatever. And one of his research steps now is that he, in his master's, and now also in a paper, he's stating that the most that part of the audience of your model is you as a designer. You create a model to improve your own understanding of what's going on. I think that is super interesting. That that the principle you're writing down, and I'm before I send it to you, could you look at this and what is your feedback? I first had many iterations in my own head, and it only started to grow when I write it down, or when I create it on a whiteboard. That's the first audience member is you as a person that creates it. And I think there's a lot of value in that, because my wife did her master's in English about language, and only when I finished in my last year of my master's, I started to address topics she had in her first year about what is text, what is meaning in text, and find out that the meaning you give to a text is really difficult and really complex. So if I write down an architecture principle and I send it out to 500 people without me coaching them and giving them context, but just, dear all people of my organization, here is principle number 1. All 500 people will read something differently than I intended to do. And that is reality. It's and that's why, yeah.
And that's where other stuff like change management really comes in, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's that's also why I'm reluctant for calling everything design, because what is a design? I don't know, because in the end, what people do in their real life, day to day, that's what they do. No matter what the design says.
Yeah.
And I think most documents or artifacts are there only to have a conversation about it. So I said, your question is most important. The question is the interesting part. The answer is way not interesting. Having the discussion about, okay, but why is it important for you? That has way more value and way more insight in what's going on than to discuss the difference between design, architecture, governance, and engineering. It's more semantics and having a same definition. But if we now have a third person joining, then we need to align with the three of us. What do you think engineering is? What do you think is? And then next person. It's not that scalable.
Yeah. I have been having these conversations with people who are calling themselves enterprise designers.
Yeah.
For me, it feels like a different field as enterprise architecture. So if I look at the fields, and if I speak to people calling themselves enterprise architects, and if I speak to people calling themselves enterprise designer, my intuition, my gut feeling says here are some key differences. But I can't really structure it in my head in a way that it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I meet in enterprise design more this creative person, which I am. I really podcast is called Verbonden, which stands for connection.
Yeah.
And really stands for connecting the dots. And recently I've been doing a lot of workshops. I really believe in facilitating, taking a facilitating point of view. Although I may have an idea of what the architecture should look like or what the team topology, what the team structures should be like. Very often I prefer to listen and to work with a group away from their day-to-day tasks and let it emerge from the groups and from the organization itself, rather than implying the theory on people and doing a very long speech on what it means to be a platform team and an enabling team. And a lot of people they really look at if you come into the room and you say I'm the enterprise architect. A lot of people nowadays, I don't know what the context is in the Netherlands, but I very often feel like the door already closes for people to really hear you, because they assume you will come with very theoretic work. And you are now in the academic area as well in enterprise architecture. So I think you have the double bingo. How do you prevent from becoming technical, and how do you stay practical, or to stay well? What's your way to speak with people, avoiding them to be lost in the academic jargon that you own?
Yeah, those are. I think the premise is not correct. I have difficulty talking to people, but I also had that before I was in academics. So that's so I can. I think language is really. So I said that I don't find it interesting how you call something, because everybody has a different meaning. Why I said that because there's a I don't know if he's a professor. There's somebody called La Palma. I think he's a professor, but sorry if he's not. And he was first author and co-author of a few papers on the definition of architecture, enterprise architecture, how it's being used, and it's all over the place. So also in the Netherlands, depends per organization, and even organization. So part of the organization, how people react to the word architect. And same for security. The word security also triggers a lot of IDs or IT. Oh, you're from IT. Oh yeah, then stamp. So labels are really powerful in a bad and a good way. So if you now have a way that the word enterprise design helps you finding people that you have a better click with, and that in your context the organizations are more open to role you like to play, then that's kudos to you. But I don't think that's a generic thing for enterprise design, but for the people that surround you and the companies that are around you, and therefore valuable for your context, but really difficult to make it for everybody. Same for architecture. And what I try to do is to find labels that give me the highest probability of a good conversation. And I find that really difficult, because I know that in my current context of people around me, if I use the word security, the most questions are really operational. And that's why I started trying to find out if the word cyber resilience triggers more holistic questions about how to design your organization, the architecture question, risk governance question around the organization, because I find those questions way more interesting than the operational stuff that I did since I was 12. And I'm not good at it. So I have different people that are way better in that. And I think that's the continuous struggle to find words that trigger the nice conversations. And there's no cookie cutter answer to that, because the enterprise architect of 20 years ago is not the professional that enterprise architecture nowadays wants. And in the Netherlands, it's also different per sector where you are. So the governmental sector has a different role definition for an enterprise architect than an international company. And an international company that's founded in France has a different way of using enterprise architecture than the one that's from Silicon Valley. So in the United States, the word enterprise architect is usually IT architecture. And
I learned it earlier with Samuel Holkman as well.
Yeah. And that's only La Palma identified a long time ago. There are 3 schools of thoughts on enterprise architecture, and IT architecture is the oldest one. But also the moving away from that, you go into the business and IT architecture. And then your focus is more about maximizing revenue, where an IT architect is looking at minimizing cost. And an IT architect for the enterprise looks at a tool that has functionality for everybody out there. And a business IT architect looks for, okay, but only for this business unit or this value stream, it needs to be adequate. And every context, therefore, has different requirements, because some contexts are really stable and other contexts are really fuzzy. And those need different processes, different people, different technology. So you have a different architecture for that. And if you're working in an ecosystem, then it's a whole total different ballgame. And therefore, for those 3 schools, you need different type of personalities as an architect, or different combination of skills in your architecture capability. It's not comparable. So go back to your question. I try to find labels and people that introduce the labels, and then it's roll the dice. Because it's a social thing. It's not a reductionistic problem.
Yeah, and like you said, sometimes I said it's very black and white before, but of course, sometimes if I use the term enterprise architect, it is well received. Still, it's like it's rolling the dice sometimes.
And that's. I think it's a good thing we cannot prevent that, because that's. Diversity is, I think, what makes us humans interesting, but also makes it really unpredictable.
And expect failure sometimes.
And then we come back to language. So I find it really interesting that in the old days, so we call it IT information technology, and in the Netherlands we used it ICT, information communication technology. And communication is a really interesting concept. About you have a sender and a receiver, and they have an intention about what they want to communicate, and then they, as a sender, you try to verbalize it and find the message, and then you send it through a medium to somebody else, and that person then retrieves the information via that medium and translates it into some meaning, and hopefully some of the intention is being transported to the receiver. But there's also a statement called "the medium is the message," and that makes it really interesting. If you are not in direct contact with somebody, what is the medium that somebody has around him that receives the information? So if somebody is in an organization where there's a bad experience with an ivory tower architect, then architect has that meaning for them, because that's the medium how they receive the information. And if you have somebody that's really active in the domain-driven design and with all the software engineers, then architecture has totally different meaning.
So you should also expect of or learn some about the context of your receiver, I guess.
Yeah. And the people around a certain word or domain have different meaning to other words than if you go to a different sector or different culture or whatever. I think we in enterprise architecture have had too little respect for those different contexts. All the books are about this is how the world works, this is how the enterprise works, so therefore blah blah blah. Or not.
It's often the frameworks that are out there. It's very often one solution for everything, but you need to tailor it, and then you need experience. I guess, our information on context, and both.
And even tailoring the framework could not be enough.
Going outside those lines as well. It's like the conscious deviations.
And that's the there was a company, a small startup. I had the opportunity to be part of creating that startup. And we made a decision to have half of the people we hired were software engineers and half of the people we hired were designers. And because I thought software is hideous, open source software is hideous, and so the user experience should be really important to make impact. And what I find out is I underestimated the difference between an engineer and a designer and how they look at the world. So not only about seeing different colors, but describing stuff, designing, drawing stuff, explaining things. That cultural gap was enormous. And I really underestimated that. And it really triggered me in being more respectful how different people are. So if we have a framework and it talks about TOGAF, ADM, it's a circle with circles and arrows. And in those circles, you have something like the business and the technology and the information. Making the choice that you have circles with lines and you communicate them in a way that it looks like a clock is already a choice in how to look at the world. And with that choice, you give other people that don't look at the world like that, and you exclude them from it. I think that's there you should also be conscious. Yeah.
Yeah, you're touching on one of the greatest debates on LinkedIn of all time, I think, in the enterprise architects groups.
Oh, I don't know about that one,
No.
but
Yeah,
had so many
maybe that's
discussions.
exaggerated, but I often see this discussion coming up from time to time. It comes back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a friend of mine. She is really skillful in training people in how to present and tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
She's really experienced in producing a theater production. All because she's a really skilled person. But when we talk to each other, my wife needs to be there to be a dolmetscher, a talk between us, because we know each other since we both were in a team. But it's on certain topics we just use different words, and we have difficulty communicating certain concepts. So, and I think that's why I think working in smaller teams and embracing emergence and is really important, because people are so different, and we use organizations to make it cookie cutter, and every organization is their own cookie cutter. But I think we underestimated how different people are, and somehow forgot to empower people and to let them be themselves, because we haven't found a way to let people be themselves in a different context. But it's that's a topic in the field of enterprise architecture we have really not addressed.
Yeah, not addressed enough. Yeah. Okay. It was lovely to have you here as a expert speaker. I have always one final question for people, which is, for you personally, in the next few months or the near future, as we are always learning as people, what is something professionally that you plan to focus on for the near future?
Basically, this last part. So again, my inspiration is from my wife. She is doing for herself every morning a tarot reading, a tarot card. And I find it really interesting, because I was raised in a more Christian context, and I learned to read the passage of the scripture and have reflections on that. And later on, I read a lot of books, and then I reflected on something I read every day. And I'm really interested in, so that's my goal for the next half year, and I think year or maybe years. How can we learn from that in enterprise architecture, knowing that a model or framework we create is being interpreted and seen by everybody in a different way? And if we want to communicate to each other, what is a way that we communicate something that helps us to improve us in our profession, but what is their useful artifact for that? Because I don't believe that if I read any more books and do more research and I put all that in a beautiful model or something, that I bring a lot of impact in the world, because everybody will see something differently, because they haven't read the same books and they had done different things with their life. So they won't have it. So they will see the document and the image in a different way. And the same with my architecture documents. I usually write them after the discussion. And it's more like note taking for the people that were present at the discussion, but somebody else, and looking back at the document, will say, what is this for rubbish? Because they were not present at it. And so that's my goal: find the alternative for a tarot card for enterprise architecture.
All right.
No clue what's going to be, but that's my holy grail.
Let me know if you crack that nut. Then we can have a follow-up conversation over here. That concludes our conversation with Edzo Botjes. I hope this episode challenged you to look at your architecture through a more human lens and to keep your system small, simple and useful. If you enjoyed these conversations, please help us grow by following this channel and sharing this episode with a colleague who needs to hear it. Every like and share helps us bring more of these deep insights into the architecture community. Thank you for listening to Verbonden, and until next time, keep connecting the dots. Many thanks to Pieter-Jan Rombout for producing and editing, and to Leonard Busset for the intro music. And of course, thank you for listening, and see you next time.